glad to serve and bring the opportunity. And this is where I landed, so here I am.
And the subcommittee.
Oh, you wanted my issue. Pro-life, and then really concerned about gender identity, which both those fall into the same category, I believe. Is that correct? Same subcommittee. And then also taxpayer funded lobbying.
Okay, so that would be A and B. It'd be easier if you told me A or B.
Sorry.
But when you're describing passionate issues, that's fine too. We can do both. Okay, Walter.
Mark, where do you get the A and B so we know? Is there a C and D?
Where is that?
Yeah, where are they?
Oh, it's in your email.
Yeah, it's in the email. Or the tabs. The tabs are in order, A, B, and C.
Well, they're 1, 2, and 3.
Well, okay.
Well, there's this one for abortion, for pro-life.
Can we put
I can put it up, but I don't know
Yeah.
that I have it.
It's in, let me tell you,
Yeah.
it's the email that was sent on, July the 8th.
So it's
Okay. It's a July the 8th email. It's
Yeah,
kind of
the
long. It's
A is the constitutional rights one. B is the one that's taxpayer funded lobbying, which triggered a lot of people going into that one. C is, what was that, state affairs. So that's kind of the catch-all for other controversial issues. Okay, Walter.
Walter West, I got out of the military after a pretty severe injury, explosion back in 2012 and recovered in 2014. Saw where the country and where we were going with things. I got interested in the party through a group of really weird bandits of liberty-minded people, some of them in this room. My passion is constitutional carry. I travel Texas. Currently, I run my business was a member of the COVID shutdown, so you can say I'm basically a hashtag COVID casualty. Got a lot of people that owe me money that can't pay it because their businesses are closed also. But I got interested and involved on this committee after running for SREC. Held my own precinct conventions for the last 4 precinct conventions I can have. This was the first year we actually had conventions. And noticed that the party was going, this is the only party of principle, and that the party was going in a wayward direction from within. Actually, my precinct chair run was very interesting. I actually had 20 signs put up around my neighborhood that said I was a communist. So, vote for the veteran communist, precinct 16, Walter West. So that's how nasty it gets in here, and I decided I'd pull the gloves off also. I want to fight for constitutional carry because on the border where I deal with human trafficking, where I deal with people that can't carry and are scared to carry, we shouldn't be asking permission for our constitutional rights. I almost died for those constitutional rights, and I've got a lot of blood on a couple pairs of boots from when I served overseas as a combat medic, and been through 67 different countries. What we're going through right now is 1989 Venezuela, and our own Republicans are lying to us. So it's up to us to hold them accountable right here, like my county did with the Sixer on Avenue. I'll tell you this, constitutional carry, I'm not going to say pro-life, because and the funny thing is I'll say pro-choice, and here's why pro-choice. That baby should be born alive and have a choice if it wants to live or die. So that should tell you exactly where I stand. God put that in there, whether it be for a tragic event that happened to that poor lady, or something else. I've had to bury twins. I know what it's like to lose children. I've been through several miscarriages with my wife, even while deployed. So I can tell you right now, pro-life, big issue on me. We have the wrong messaging, and we're dealing with the Democrats the wrong way. We need to change how we're doing it. Constitutional carry, you guys saw our emergency carry bill we passed, does nothing for us. And we have people getting robbed and rioted. Those people that in St. Louis you saw with the guns, the Democrats, and he's an attorney that represented the Black Lives Matter client, he just got served a warrant for his arrest with bringing a firearm. He and his wife both did. They just got served a warrant on Saturday. Those people were defending their property in St. Louis, Missouri. Those people are now, they bonded out of jail, but they were arrested for protecting their rights when people broke through their gates in their closed gated house. That's what we're coming to Texas, 1989 Venezuela is here. So drop the propaganda and looked around in the parks and iPads. This right here is where it gets done. If your elected official's not doing it, you get them out of office and bring someone else as well. Constitutional carry is, my number one.
Thank you, Walter. Madeline, you're over here somewhere, right? No, you're there. Okay.
I'm Madeline here. I'm SD5. I live in Huntsville, Walker County, and my husband and I decided several years ago to get involved locally in politics. And I'm a past president of Walker County Republican Women for 3 years, and I was my husband's campaign manager. He won the Constable Precinct 2 in Walker County in 2016, and he's re-elected this year. I'm just very involved locally with all of our organizations and everything, and I'm pro-military, pro-veterans, taking care of our veterans. I'm married to an Army veteran, and my youngest son is on his way to Turkey right now. He's active duty Air Force.
Woo-hoo.
And I'm pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and I'm very interested in property taxes. And I chose A&B.
A and B, in that order or the other order?
Yes.
Okay, Keith?
Keith Nielsen, been on the platform committee, been to a few of these. For me, I've been involved in the party from the grassroots all the way up to the top. I'm the incoming Harris County Republican Party chair. And I'm tired of losing, that's why I got involved. So for me, pro-life, constitutional carry.
Which one?
J.R. Haas, Senate District 7. I'm a husband, homeschool father of 4, deacon in my local church, president of my HOA for the last 4 years or so. So you'll have a lot of grace for me, please. Precinct chairman for Precinct 684 and also serve as election judge. And just finished serving as SD7 Resolution Committee. Main issues that I'm interested in: parental rights, vaccine choice, school choice, religious freedom, obviously constitutional conservative, limited government, all those principles. But what brought me here and got me involved in the party is, you know, I've been pro-life for many years, and the more I've studied the issue and continue to understand, you know, the 55,000 some odd preborn children that are being murdered in our state every year, the strategies that we all, I mean, many of us are pro-life, but when we examine the strategies and tactics we've been using to challenge this, I think we can, if we examine ourselves and grade ourselves, we'll see that we're really not getting anywhere. And so based on that, as I've studied it deeper, I'm here and would like to support, as Walter West mentioned, I'm here to end abortion. I'm not just pro-life, I want to end the slaughter of 55,000 preborn children from what our platform says, from conception till natural death. And if we're going, I believe that the law is a tutor, and if we're going to put forward a law or tell our legislators to go implement a law, then it should be consistent with our values. So let's start from conception and hold our electors accountable to it. So my core committee, or my first committee, would be Constitutional Rights Subcommittee.
Okay, thank you. By the way, not a whole lot of takers yet on state affairs. There's a lot of very controversial issues in state affairs, so don't think that's. Let me pull that up in a second. I'll give you a few of those. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna enjoy it even if I force you over there. It'd be nice if you volunteered.
You can force me.
Shelby.
There's Shelby Williams, Senate District 8. Everything ties in with how I got involved in this in the first place. I've always voted Republican since I turned 18 and I could vote for the first time. I was never active. It was in 2016 through Convention of States that I became active, going to my first precinct convention, then SD convention, then state convention, then I was elected as an alternate delegate to the national convention. I jumped in and I haven't looked back since. Last year I was elected to Plano City Council. I now serve as the state director for Convention of States. So no regrets. I'm moving forward full steam ahead. My top issue, I would have said 6 months ago, was along the lines with what I do with the Convention of States, is reining in the power and scope of the federal government. The past few months have shown us that that need is much closer to home as well, reining in all levels of government. I would say my top two committee choices are B and A in that order. I have become somewhat of an authority in property tax matters in Texas, championed the property tax reform that we saw in Texas last legislative session. I think it's the tip of the iceberg and what we need to get done, but I have been working very deep in the weeds on property tax matters, including ending taxpayer-funded lobbying.
Good, and before we go forward, somebody asked about what's on state affairs. I'll just give you some of the broad issues from the keywords. I don't know if y'all looked at the pull downs and how you can sort things and all that kind of stuff. But there are things ranging from contact tracing to congressional accountability, pay, privilege, etc., the TRACE Act, COVID response, disaster declarations, E-Verify, education choice, elections, election integrity, emergency powers, health and human services, a variety of things related to health care, law enforcement, kind of the ongoing legislative priorities that didn't get done last session. Those are mostly there. As far as the way the things were kind of worded as they came in, term limits, transparency in government, and vaccine mandates. So there's a lot of variety in that, and that particular committee in the Senate in particular tends to get almost all of the really controversial issues, even if you might think they would better go in another committee. And so we've kind of structured these. We've only got 3 subcommittees here. On the platform side, we've got 9. We've tried to structure these to match up as best as possible, although it's imperfect because you're trying to balance the load a little bit between subcommittees. But we've tried to get them to match as close as possible to the Senate committee structure. Okay, if that gives you any help. So people can start thinking in that mindset as far as how do we get this passed in the 87th. So anyway, there's a lot of good stuff over in that state affairs one if you haven't looked at it lately. Okay, where were we? Rich?
Yep. Hi, everybody. I'm Rich Diot, SD9. I live in South Lake, Texas, which is in northeast county. Been involved in party politics off and on for probably a little over 2 decades, and most recently got really engaged about 2008 for some random reason. We have been pretty involved since then, done a number of state conventions. I can't tell you how many. I've been the chair of our platform committee at the SD level a couple times. I was on legislative priorities here last time, and I see a lot of veterans of this committee from before here. I'm looking forward to serving with y'all. I was involved with SB2 in the last legislative down in Austin quite a bit. I normally focus on pro-life issues in Austin, but I got a little diverted on SB2. Following that, I ran for and won a seat on the Tarrant County Appraisal District Board of Directors. So, and that's been interesting. In the last 5 years, I'll just give you a little snippet. In the last 5 years, property values have gone up and people have protested their taxes. Harris County has, over the last 4 years, seen an 11% increase in the number of people who are protesting their taxes. Bexar County is 27%. Travis County is 36%. Dallas County is 49.7%, almost 50%. And Tarrant County is 265%. And I tell people that, depending on who they are, it's no big deal, or it's appalling. It's very interesting to see what, that happened. The real market really did. But my main issue is life. My wife and I run a little thing called Life Education in Action, which you can get to on Facebook. And we go around talking about what the Bible really says about abortion. If you're interested, there's a 50-minute video that we did in the courtroom in which Roe was decided in Dallas in 1973, called the Roe Courtroom Video. And there's some other things on there too. We're interested in helping the church understand this issue because while we work here politically, we also have to work in culturally. And I think the church is AWOL on the issue pretty much, and so what can we do but teach them what it really says. So that's my number one issue. So I would say for me, it would be A and A.
But you don't.
Thank y'all very much.
But you're not going for the property tax side.
If I got pushed, that's, I guess, where I'd go, but I'm really ambitious about pro-life.
Gotcha. Okay, who's next? Jesse, I guess, numerically.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Jesse Taylor. I'm the precinct chair of District 1297 of Tarrant County Republican Party. Unlike Shane, Shelby, he said he started voting Republican at the age of 18. Well, unlike him, I didn't vote Republican at 18. If you hadn't noticed, I'm a black guy. and in my culture, we're taught to vote Democrat. You know, as a matter of fact, they almost put us to shame if we would even think about voting Republican. So, as a kid, I would always hear people mention, "Oh, they ain't gonna let us do this. Or they ain't gonna change that. Oh, hey, man, they let us do this murder. They changed this law." And forever, I've always wondered, well, man, as a kid, I'm like, well, who is they? Who is they? So, man, I appreciate being here today because I'm with the they people. So, 7 years ago, I actually joined the Republican Party. And when Obama was in office, I started looking at some of the priorities that he was pushing. And that's what really made me change my mind. So I started looking at the platform of the Republican Party, and I put both of them side by side. And I looked at the Democratic Party, and I looked at the Republican Party, and I was like, well, damn. I said the Republican Party has more values that I value even as a black man. I value these, and I don't value these over here. So therefore, I changed at that moment. I changed, and I started going to parties, and Republican parties, and getting involved, and next thing you know, Jesse Taylor's here, and I appreciate being here. I'm representing CD10, Senate District 10. One of my main concerns is criminal justice reform, parenting rights also, and definitely want to ban abortions, period, across the table. Across the table. So those are some of the issues that I'm fighting for today, and some of my constituents, when I was going down here, they still want to make sure we push this marijuana issue also to make sure no one gets arrested for marijuana. So that was one of the things that I was hinted when some of my constituents told me.
Yeah.
But those are the things that I'm here for, and I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
God bless you. Julie.
Yes, sir. How do I follow that?
I don't know.
No pressure.
Sets a pretty high bar.
Yes, it surely does.
And by the way, before you start, Julie,
Yes, sir.
I talked to most of y'all at one point or another on the phone, if I didn't know you already, or on the Zoom call or something like that. When I talked to Jesse, literally, he was more excited than any of you about being here. Absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, Julie, sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna unmask because I'm talking to everybody.
Sure.
Good morning, y'all. I'm Julie Pickering from SD11. I live in the great county of Missouri County, which I believe is probably the most red county in our state. My first time with the Republican Party was when I was 16 years old. I worked on Tom DeLay's campaign, and that's been about 30 years ago now. So in some way, shape, form, or fashion, I've been involved with every convention except for when I was having babies.
No excuse.
New Republicans.
Yeah, yes, I'm second generation American, so liberalism and socialism in my household growing up were dirty words, so I didn't have a choice. I would have been disowned by my family if I weren't constitutional conservative. They know, they love America, and they know exactly what America means to my family and to a lot of people. My main issues, let me tell you a little bit more. So I'm on the board of my church, which is a multicultural, non-denominational Christian church in our area. My husband and I actually church planted the church because it's important to us to advance the Christian values as well as Republican values. I also am an elected official. I serve on my school board. I serve about 30,000 children at about 252 square miles. My school district is one of the fastest growing districts in the state of Texas. For the past 8 years, we've added about 1,000 kids a year, and we are projected for the next 15 years to add about 1,000 kids a year. So we are building schools very quickly, but we have also lowered tax rate while we have been building schools. Anybody that says it cannot be done, it can be done. Tell them to come talk to me and my team. We're doing it. Okay. The other thing is I'm also pro-life. It's why I serve on my school board. I say that, I love the unborn and the born. I love children. I love business. I love children. That's my two passions. The other thing is I'm very passionate about is the Second Amendment. I think that we are on a slippery slope with these red flag laws, and it's going to leave our Second Amendment rights in the hands of a lot of liberal judges. And we can't have that. It's never been up for debate. It's not up for debate now. I guess, is there anything else, Mr. Ramsey?
Committee choices, if you've got one.
Okay, well, as I'm precinct chair, I do a lot of things in my county with my Republican Party. But my committee choices would be Second Amendment concerning red flag laws. Also, if you want to put me somewhere with education, I'm pretty well versed in property tax law and education funding and, all of that. That's the world I walk in for years now.
Okay.
And then pro-life. That would be the third.
You like all of our platforms.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay, who's next? Jonathan's next.
Jonathan Gaspard, 12. My political interest goes back to probably second grade, and I tell everybody this, and this is actually a true story. I remember walking into second grade. It was 1985, and I don't know why I remember this, but I remember sitting in the front row, looking at the American flag, going, Ronald Reagan just won re-election. It's going to be a good year. And that's the first thing. I don't know why I remember that, but that's why I remember it, and I've been very interested politically since then. Locally, I'm on the finance committee for the Tarrant County Republican Party. I've been the former chair for the Northeast Tarrant Young Republicans, former policy director for the Texas Young Republicans, former precinct chair. 2016, I was on the platform committee. 2018, I was on the legislative priorities committee. My passions are pro-life, absolutely, Second Amendment, and due to recent events, I think my third hill has changed into reining in government abuse of power, such as executive orders, and figuring out how to make that work in a Republican framework. So, ACB.
Okay, next, that would be Jean. Where's Jean?
Jean Pack.
Yes, Jean Pack, there you are.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gene Pack, and, well, it's Eugene Pack, but I'm only called Eugene from my mother when I was in trouble. All my friends call me Gene. I got involved with the party at the time of Betsy Lake exit. She was moving out, and I moved in. I was taught by my wife, mainly because of the issues that the Democrat Party was putting out, and the things that she was reading and understanding more about. And she encouraged me to look at it and see that that was just plain wrong, what they were doing to our community. So I got involved with my wife, and we began to assert our voices on the pro-life issue. We were the first couple to open a crisis pregnancy center into the African American community ever. We went on from there to create a national organization called LEARN, Life Education and Research Network, consisted of 22 different states of all Black Americans, because I got tired of white folks asking me where the Black folks at when I go to my pro-life meetings. So we started that. I served as executive director for 7 years, and it's still going on today. I began as a precinct chairman, as I said, under what's his name? Gary Paul at that time, and went on to serve as a senior advisor to his administration, and continued on and became a Senate District Chairman, and also served on the SREC committee as a committee man. Also continued my realm as a senior advisor to the party here in Harris County. I also am now appointed by the governor, serving on the crime victim, the advisory board for the state of Texas, and just don't know what else to do besides serve as a Republican. I've been called a lot of different names for just being Black, and I love it. I love to fight. I love to get into the arena. As I mentioned, everybody knows that I'm pro-life, but more my passion would be to serve on that Texas State Affairs Board. I would be honored to serve in that position because I'm currently communicating with different of our representatives in order to try to make changes, especially in my community. So whatever I can do to help, I just want you guys to know that for over 30 years, I've always been here to help.
Justin Till.
Good afternoon, everybody. My significant other is an ICU nurse, and I'm not allowed to take the mask off, or she'll yell at me a lot. But my name is Justin Till. I'm representing SD 14, Travis County, Austin here. This makes the 4th Senate district that I've represented at a state convention, starting in my hometown out in the Permian Basin, then in the Concho Valley, San Angelo, where I began working with the local Republican Party, became vice chairman of the Angelo State University College Republicans, state chair of the Texas Federation of College Republicans, and College Republican National Committeeman while I was there. After that, I moved to Austin, then bounced around working for a number of elected Republicans, and I've since landed in Austin working for a neighbor to the south in Galveston County, Representative Greg Bonham, where I am to this day. I don't know that I have a primary objective or a single issue that stands out to me because I, as chief of staff, am the chief and the staff, and I therefore work on all of them. But I will say some of the more impactful work that I've been able to do with my current boss at least has been expanding funding for crisis pregnancy centers 2 legislative sessions in a row, up to I believe $90 million or something like that. So that's opened up a lot of new centers, helped a lot of new mothers in places that have never been served before. I'm very happy about that. And that effort will continue, so stay tuned. We've also worked on in-hospital DNR orders on the pro-life front, an area that we've been trying to work on for about a decade. Finally made a little progress on that this last legislative session. As I mentioned on our Zoom call, we banned rolling polling finally, so we can't let school districts and others manipulate our elections. So as you can tell, I'm kind of all over the place. We've also passed the first e-verify mandates for state agencies that have ever happened before. So I'm all over the place. I work on everything, and I therefore volunteer as tribute for state affairs, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
illustrious members of this body, as I'm hearing from you guys. Came into the Republican Party as an activist in the early 2000s when I found Christians who were involved in the political arena. Up until that time, I had never met one single person who was involved. My life had revolved around church, and there was nobody ever in my church that was involved. And somebody finally said, "Come go with me to a Republican women's club." And I walked in. Now, mind you, they didn't invite me once. They invited me every month for a whole year. And I finally showed up. And I walked into this room, and it was filled with people who shared my principles and my values, and that they were trying to make a difference in my country. And I knew I was right where I belonged. To that end, I have been all the offices in the Republican Women's Club, president, fastest growing Republican Women's Club in the nation for 2 years in a row, with my predecessor and then under my tenure. Today, I am State Republican Executive Committee woman in a different SD than I was at that time. My husband is Stan Stannard, who was the elected county clerk in Harris County, which is the third largest county in the United States and the second largest voting entity in the United States. He's been one that has been protecting and looking at every possible way with technology to prevent fraud and to protect our votes so that they have integrity. But as on the SREC in this past session, I was put on the Legislative Priorities Committee. I asked for that. And Mark graciously asked me to be the working group chair for ending taxpayer-funded lobbying. And I took a big bite out of that apple, and I began to chew on it, trying to figure out what we needed to do. And I found out how important this was to the financial well-being of all of our government entities, and how much money they are wasting on lobbying. And it became a passion for me. And I was in the legislature as much as I possibly could be, 2 to 3 days every other week for the session. And we are made so much more progress than anybody ever gave us hope for. And we have learned a lot, and through the effectiveness of this body, we are now having an impact at the state level with the legislators, who are now beginning to call those of us who are on the SREC, on the Legislative Priorities Committee, and other members of that body where they have never paid attention before. We have become a force to be reckoned with. And that's the importance of what you guys are doing here today, is to prepare us to be more impactful in 2021. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming that you're going to allow me to continue with ending taxpayer-funded lobbying. I'm a little bit confused as to whether that's state affairs or B, because on some of them, you've got state affairs marked, a taxpayer-funded lobbying resolution for this committee is marked as state affairs. So wherever you do that, obviously pro-life, there's so many things that we need to do, but right now, the newest thing that I am passionate about, and I'm going to assume that this is constitutional, is the loss of liberty. If we don't make a stand and say, we're not going to let you take our liberties away again, like you did this year, and that it covers so many different things, whether it's constitutional carry, whether it's pro-life, they're taking away from us, and we need to stop it, and we need to stop it now on constitutional basis. That's
Yeah, thank you, Gail. It was late when I was dividing up these. I may have put a few in the wrong place, but it was my intent that the taxpayer-funded lobbying part go in Committee B. So just, if there's some that I accidentally put in
I just
C
wanted to make
or
sure.
A,
I don't
we
care
can
where
get
it
those
is.
moved back into that one, yeah.
Okay, Liz.
Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here with you guys to serve on this committee. I've had the honor of serving on platform committee at state 6 different times, and on rules 3 separate times. But issues are really where my heart is. And the first time that I got to serve on platform was in 2000. And as I got ready to serve on that committee, I looked at that list of 30 people, and I thought, you know, at that point, it was early in our history with our pro-life platform at that point. And I thought, you know, that was my passion and that was my issue at the time. And I thought, you know, I'm willing to stand 30 to 1. I don't have a problem with that, but I thought, you know, that's not going to be very effective. So I started to pray down this list of names that I had no idea who these people were. And I got there that very first day, and we did what we're doing now. And by the time they got to me at 16, I was in tears, because as people started to share who they were and why they were there, it was the same story that I've heard so far. People were there because life was their passion, and they were working in crisis pregnancy centers, and they were involved in their church, and they were there because life mattered to them. And I am sad that as we sit here 20 years later, that we have not ended this atrocity. But I am heartened that everybody that sits here is working hard to do that. And that gives me great hope that we're steadfast in this. And as I've sat on our local committee since '98, you know, every year, everybody sends forward, they all send forward platforms, and they say, we want to keep this in the platform. Make sure that you don't do more platform. Make sure that you stand solid on this, and that encourages me greatly. My big passion right now, for the last 2 legislative sessions, has been working on the Alamo. I am a Texan, a 6th-generation Texan, and that would be enough right there for me. Our land commissioner has our Alamo under attack. He has decided that our Alamo needs to be reimagined, and that we need to dilute the telling of our 1836 story. And he has brought in a group of Yankees to do that, and that offends me terribly. So that in and of itself would be enough, but I happen to be a descendant of Colonel Travis, so I have drawn a line in sand and will not let that happen. Over my dead cold body. Will he do anything to the Alamo, make it Disneyland or anything else, nor will he move the cenotaph, because that is the grave marker of our fallen comrades who gave their lives. And so I've spent the last 2 legislative sessions down in Austin, letting our legislators know what is really in his reimagined plan and what the plans are. And so I'm heartened that the horrible incidents of the last couple of months, with all this mess that people have been doing with our monuments, it at least has shed some attention on the fact that we've got to do something to protect the monuments. Yes. And our bill passed out of one House Legislature last session, but we did not get it passed. And so that's something that's got to happen. And I think with everything that's happened, we now are going to have some impetus for people to really get behind that. And the legislators are really, they're not going to have any choice now, because we've got public sentiment on our side. So that's a place that I think that we're going to have to do something. And so I'll go wherever you want me, Mark. Just-
I think that, I appreciate that, but I think that one's in
It's
state
definitely
affairs.
state affairs,
Yeah.
for sure, yeah.
Okay, Sean.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right, my name is Sean Sheehan, representing SD 17. Really happy to be here with y'all for a second time. I served on this committee 2 years ago in 2018. Been involved with the party for about 12 years, so I started coming to convention in 2008. Got involved as a precinct chair in 2014. Off and on since then, resuming that responsibility as soon as we get seated here in Harris County in a couple of weeks. I'm the chair of the Harris County Republican Party Candidates Committee, so very involved in candidate training, candidate recruitment. Let's see what else. Yeah, so my background, I'm an engineer, so I apologize in advance to all of y'all.
We got 3 of us.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, no, sending to the corner.
Let's see, I work in oil and gas, worked for Chevron for the last 15 years or so. Got involved in politics right out of college. Just, frustrated by 3 things. One was just fiscal sanity, fiscal policy. The second, and y'all may see where my committee preference goes with this, is creeping bureaucracy and its stifling of liberty and business opportunities and just progress of our nation. What was the third? I don't know. Anyway, I'll come back to that later. It'll come to me. Over the last few months, that's really been reinforced, and so my number 1 priority for this week is state affairs, and really to address this use of emergency powers. I would be absolutely tickled if we could leave this week with a call to call a special session ASAP. I don't know if we're going to go that far, but I would love it. But I'd definitely like to serve on the state affairs.
Awesome.
SD 18, Paul Yamrick, Malacca County. We're Shiner, as everybody knows we're Shiner. So.
Hey.
I guess we're going back in time. I got involved with Goldwater's campaign in '64, so I've been doing this for a while. Not sure that's a good thing to say, but it's been a while. And I guess I'll cut it short. I'm active in the county secretary now, and have been for a long time. But not to get into what I've been doing, I just talk my passion. I mentioned it on our Zoom, and I'll say it again, is education. If I look at everybody's issues that are passionate about, let's talk about liberty. We were talking about liberty. If, as a child, I don't know what liberty means, what are you trying to do? I don't understand. Talk about Second Amendment. Second Amendment doesn't mean anything to me if I'm not educated in civics. So fiscal responsibility, all these things turn back to education. So I just want to make sure, if you think about it, I think education, pro-choice, pro-life, all these things really come back to being educated. I'm in a great room of people. It's really great to meet. We'll be meeting you and seeing you and all. You guys you're thinking about it. A lot of people don't do that. Education, I think, is the key. So I'm going to stop that. So state affairs would be my first choice. I guess second would be constitutional rights and other than that, thank you. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. And you're a fellow engineer, right?
Yes, that's.
Oh my gosh,
Yes.
we're surrounded.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Marion.
Thank you. My name is Marion Knowlton. I'm from Senate District 19. I can beat you from 1964. My first election, and I was probably about 1. My mother had me stuffing envelopes to help Richard Nixon his campaign in 1960. Wow. I still have that little button that has a little X on it for Richard Nixon. So I come from my mother was a Republican committee woman. We were involved my whole life in politics. She helped William Roth get elected. I don't know how many of you remember William B. Roth, but. So I got involved in Texas politics in 2008 when Sarah Palin was selected to run for vice president. That energized me. Her energy was just enthusiastic. It was infectious, and I went to a Republican women's group and joined that. And they say, "How did you get a job in the Republican Party?" you show up for a meeting. And here I am today, I'm now a member of the SREC. I have held many jobs. I was a county chairman for 5 years. I was a Republican woman president for 4 years. County election clerk, or election judge. You know, I've just sort of gone that route. And I was elected to the SREC in 2018, and I was appointed party organization committee chair for that. During that time, we added a supplement to the county chairman's manual with Terry. He was served on that committee with me. And so we've done a lot. Now that brings me to where I'm going, and I'm running for state representative for House District 31. That House District is Atascosa County south to Rio Grande City. This is my neighbor to the south. And I stepped up to run because I'm challenging an incumbent Democrat who's been there 16 years and has not had a Republican challenger since 2012. The district has been trending red for the last 2 election cycles. I can tell you that in our minority-majority district, we are conservative. And the issues that are affecting me, so the issues that are passionate about, and anecdotally about taxpayer-funded lobbying, my husband is a county commissioner. He serves on the appraisal district board as well. And we sued the appraisal district. He did. We didn't have an attorney. He represented us pro se. He's not an attorney, but he's a smart guy. And in that lawsuit to district court, we spent about $1,000 in filing fees. And the appraisal district spent $40,000 in attorney's fees. That's our tax money. That's taxpayer-funded lobbying. And so that has been an issue that we've been following. We actually got a bill passed in the last 2 legislatures that would have started taxpayer property tax reform. And on the last one, in '86, it was passed by the House and the Senate, and on the last day it was vetoed by the governor. And my only thought is there was always reasons, but you think about the taxpayer funded group that is lobbying against these bills to have meaningful reform. I don't know that for a fact, but it sure looks like it. So that's been my interest. Now as I move forward and I look at, I'm interested in pro-life, I'm interested in education because I think that's so important. And as I look at my House district race, I look at the people in my House district. 7 of the 10 counties are run solid Democrats. And the folks there are desperate for information. They're desperate for being able to participate. They want representation. And they're denied all of the things that we as Republicans take for granted. And so that's where my passion is now, is to educate, inform, and represent. And I don't know, if that puts me in state affairs. I'm there. You can put me where you need me. But that's where my journey is taking me now. And I look forward to working with all of you and gleaning your knowledge and sharing what I know and moving forward to help this party move forward. Thank you.
Aaron. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron Pena, SD20 Hidalgo. I believe I've always been conservative my whole life. I started trending Republican in 2002. My father ran for state party chairman on the Democratic side. Was quickly told, you can't do that. The Democratic chairman is only for an Anglo. The African American caucus and the Hispanic caucus switch every other convention. So my little brother passed away, and he ran for state representative. Was a conservative Democrat for 8 years, and decided to switch parties in 2010, giving the Republicans a supermajority.
Yay.
Since he ran for office, the Republicans were always defending him because we were pro-life, because we were pro-gun, and because we were against taxes, because it affects the low income more than anyone else. So we've always voted that way. And in 2010, I quickly organized. I went to all the Republican groups. There was 3 guys at college Republican group on campus, I said, hey, we need to do this countywide. I founded the Hidalgo County Young Republicans. From 10 members, we grew over to 500, ended up being one of the largest in the nation. I'm precinct chair of 135. I will be the new precinct chair of 14. I'm a candidate currently for SRUC 20, Hidalgo, Nueces, Jim Wells. My passions, I'm a father of 4. I believe in equal parenting. I believe the single parent household is a huge reason why we have major ills in our society and our culture right now. We need to have our fathers stand up, give them responsibility, and what a better way to automatically have just a presumption of equal parenting is in the best interest of the child. As well believe in constitutional rights. I love going to the island, not being able to go to the largest barrier island during a disaster declaration and being able to seclude myself 10, 20, 30, 40 feet away from the next person is insane to me. Suicides going up, child molestations have spiked, domestic violence has spiked, so we definitely need to rein in these edicts by our county judges. Property taxes as well. In Hidalgo County, we are the highest property taxes of populated counties because we have a never-ending influx of a liability indigent healthcare. So I believe we need to strip the federal law that we don't mark where these people are from and send the bill to that country, or we reduce the amount of money that we give to that country. That's all I can say. I'm glad and honored to be my first year on legislative priorities. I do disaster recovery, governmental relations in South Texas for the Texas General Land Office, and I was policy advisor on water agri affairs for the Lieutenant Governor for 4 years prior. So thank you all so much. I'm here to help. State affairs, please.
State affairs. I could have guessed.
I'm Terry Harper, and I was born a Republican. My parents were Republicans when Republican wasn't cool in Texas, and there were no elected Republicans in those days. Speaking of conventions, my folks dragged me in the 50s and 60s, I believe, to every national convention from California to Jersey City, including Nixon and Barry Goldwater and all of those. And it was just built into me. When I became a young adult, like most of us, family comes right away, and trying to earn an income and providing for that family, politics became second, third, fourth, I'm not sure. I've always voted, but I was not always happy. A number of years ago, living on the I-35, I-10 corridor, where growth is, like most of Texas, just crazy right now. I live on rural property. I had public water, I had electricity, I had a volunteer fire department, I had a sheriff's office, I even had a paved road. But the city of Seguin wanted me. They wanted my property, and they mostly wanted my tax money and had nothing to offer for it. I worked with Senator Campbell to stop forced annexation. We managed to get a bill passed, but it only applied to counties over 500,000 people. So that got me into becoming much more interested, and I became a delegate. I guess this is my third convention. I found that the only way I could really get things done was through the legislature. I managed to become an SRAC member. I am in hopes of being a sophomore here in a few days. And one of the first things they ask you to do is sign up for committees. Well, I didn't know anything about committees, but I picked a really good one. It's called Legislative Priorities. And, I spent a ton of time with Gail and Mark spent a really good part of 5 months in the 86, several days a week in Austin, on my own dime, I might add. And I just fell in love. I mean, this is where we make it happen, and developing relationships with our elected officials, pounding on their door, pestering them to death. That's where we get things done. My personal priorities are taxpayer-funded lobbying. Of course, Gail and I were there a lot. My new love is, I call it opt-in, opt-out. And that goes back to education. Currently, in the government school system, parents have the option to opt out of extracurricular activities, things that are non-traditional education. Like I was at that age, I was busy doing other things, and my kids went to school. Actually, my kids were privately educated, but that's another story. And that was for that very reason, was that there's a lot of stuff going on in our public school system that's destroying our country. They're being indoctrinated at early ages. So I came up with this idea of rather than opting out of any particular program, apparently we have to opt in. And I think that would be a big answer to some of that problem. So that is really going to be my personal legislative priority in this next session. I have a senator and a few House members that are willing to carry that for us. And I'm going to be working hard on that. And of course, pro-life is, I mean, that's just good common sense. Another thing that I'm going to be working on is land development agreements, which is sort of what got me into this. When the city of Seguin was encroaching, when their ETJ was 1,000 feet from my gate, so for years and years and years, I was in the boonies. One of the ways you could keep from being annexed was under duress to sign a land development agreement which said that you would not do anything but agriculture for X number of years and they would not annex you. And it was signed under duress. It was the only option you had. So I would like to go in and have those overturned because it was forced. You had no choice. So that's really my priorities and what I would like to do. Most of those, of course, come under state affairs. But I think you know me. I'll go where you send me. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Jerry. Did, Paul is not here. Did Troy Jackson get here?
I'm right here.
Oh, great. Okay.
Stand up, Tom.
Good to see you again, Mark. I'm Troy Jackson. I look different because I got rid of all my gray. Well, just for me. It doesn't trick every time.
I know that brand. I just hadn't done it lately.
So I represent SD 23. It's a rough district. You guys know who the senator is there. Been working on him for a while. As for a little background on me, I'm originally from New York. I'm one of those Yankees. I've been a conservative my entire life. Have always voted Republican, even in New York.
Wow.
There were limited Republican candidates, but that's the way I always went. I've never been on the other side of the aisle. Since I've been in SD 23, I've been learning about the mindset of people on that side of the aisle. Very interesting. As for a little bit more background on me, I hold a doctorate degree in theology and apologetics, and I hold a second doctorate degree in crisis counseling and it's a conflict management. So, needless to say, in SD 23, I have a lot of that. I get to experience and use a lot of what I've learned on that side, dealing with those people. I'm honored to be working here with you guys. I actually have served on legislative priorities before, 1996.
Oh, my.
So it's been a while, just after moving here, because how you guys have your conventions here, we don't have them on this scale in New York. Needless to say why. There are a few conservative counties in New York that are dominantly conservative, but I mean, we're not well represented throughout the state. So I'm honored to be here to serve with you guys. Some of my major priorities are taxpayer-funded lobbying. Big thing for me. Property tax, not reform, but property tax relief. My property taxes went up to $9,000 this year.
Wow.
Yes, so, and I only live on a quarter acre. So that's ridiculous. So needless to say, I'm very passionate about that. And then, you know, in the areas of justice, so to speak, I'm passionate in that area from a different perspective than most people. My perspective on justice is the fact that we need judges that will follow the rule of law.
Amen.
Not legislate on emotions and feelings. And so I'm big on putting language in and making sure we have language that will hold them accountable in their decisions, whether they're considered a county judge or a district court judge or a state judge. They need to be held accountable to follow the rule of law. Thank you guys so much.
Amen.
Chip Howell.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chip Howell. Hail from Bell County in the Great City District of 24. 20 years ago, this is my anniversary to my first convention. Right here, well, right across the street, I guess, at the George R. Brown Convention Center. It was a great honor to be able to have as my guest that time my high school economics and government teacher. They just don't make them like her anymore. I learned so much, and I'm here today probably because of what she taught. She has since passed, but I'm here to hold the torch and continue on. I also stayed with a couple of friends of mine. Actually, I stayed at their house. They were on vacation. Some college friends of mine who lived in North Houston at the time, while they still live in the same home. And I had hoped that I would be able to have their 18-year-old son as my guest this time. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Seventh generation Texan from the Central Texas area. My family founded Milam County, which at that point was pretty much half of Senate District 5, or part of Senate District 22, and part of Senate District 24. I have served on the Rules Committee. This is my first time on legislative priorities. I'm looking forward to it. I was involved with the Young Republicans, was founding president of Bell County Young Republicans. Served on the national board and served on the state board a couple times. I'm passionate about a lot of the issues that we've looked over in the priorities. My weight is life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, as it was originally written. And the constitutional rights kind of sounds like the first for me, and state affairs is probably the second, but I still do feel very strongly about property taxes and tax-funded lobbying. I actually live in a little enclave called Morgan's Point Resort, that we are landlocked by Belton Lake in the city of Temple. I do not get to vote on the people who provide tax abatements to Walmart, but I have to pay the taxes, the increased school district taxes, because they have the mass growth that they had in that side of the town, city, that side of the county. That to me is taxation without representation. And I think many of us are feeling a little pushed, maybe a lot pushed, by how our property taxes are currently hitting us. I'm sure I have plenty more to say, but I'll save it for later.
It's okay, thank you. Walt Smith.
Howdy, I'm Walt Smith. This is my second time serving on this committee. How many of y'all were here last time? See a lot of familiar faces. I come from Hayes County, just outside of Austin, and represent from Hayes, Guadalupe, and part of Bexar County, all the way down into San Antonio. Is our SD 25. Looking at the priorities that I want to talk about and really focus on this week, if you would have asked me 3 months ago, they would be completely different than what they are today. And I'm a county commissioner in Hayes County, and I've been able, or forced, to watch firsthand what can happen when you give somebody the power that they never expected and don't know how to use. My county was the only county in the state that had a curfew instituted by a county judge. We have elected officials who know that they have no enforcement ability. We have a county judge that literally put his campaign logo on do not enter signs for businesses without masks. Paid for them with county funds. And so it's those things that I can tell you that are going to be my top priority. Everything on our list, those of y'all who were here last time can share with our brethren, our new brethren, that there was no bigger fight over the fight on what the language around priority number 1, abortion, was last time. Just the semantics of that language, and so I'm very excited to see the way that it's broken down. And I will tell you that I'm probably going to be one of the few people in the room that I agree 99% of the time when it comes to taxpayer-funded lobbying, that it should not be done. But I also represent a county that's one of the fastest growing in the U.S. And that being the case, we're right next to a major municipality that we have to fight on a daily basis. They have anywhere from 8 to 10 representatives in the State House that they depend on a daily basis, and we have one that we share with other counties. And at the end of the day, 4 years ago, whenever they came into our county and said, we're going to take your water, and we have the votes to do it, we couldn't fight them on our own. And so for us, we had to go get help in the state capitol because we were going to lose. And in the end, we were able to go to the leadership. We built a coalition, and we were able to save the water rights in our county from someone outside it trying to take it. But there are those exceptions that I think need to be talked about and addressed when we talk about taxpayer-funded lobbying. But I could not agree with you more when we talk about tax rates and those kind of things. But there are things that are outside that box that we need to discuss. And so for me, personally, it's going to be state affairs and justice. So CB.
CB. Okay, great. Appreciate it. Who's next? Michael.
Good afternoon, Mike Tefdal, SD 26, Bexar County, home of the Alamo, which was mentioned. And so we'll talk about that in a moment. So we're going to talk about how they first got started. Well, my first political event was attending a Gerald Ford rally. So not quite as old as some of the distinguished members, but, and then that year in our school, we had a school election. Sadly, he lost our school election as well. Fast forward a little bit, along the way, had 21 years serving our nation in uniform, along with 2 all-expense paid vacations. Anybody who's been on those all-expense paid vacations, you know exactly what they are about. After all that, starting active in politics in 2014, my presence here is all blamed on Ted Cruz. If he hadn't sent an email that said, there's this thing called precinct convention, you should go see about it, I wouldn't have been here, because I showed up to it. The election judge had no clue what the heck they were talking about. So fortunately, Senator Cruz had said, fill out all this stuff, take it to county headquarters. I did all that. And as they say, the rest is history. Became a precinct chair. Here, fill this out. Go to the SD convention. Here, fill this out. Be a volunteer on the SD convention. So I've been to every SD and state since then. I've served on SD committees in 14, 16, 18, and this last year I was just the nominations committee chair. So anybody from SD 26, they're here because they came through my committee. At the state level, I was part of state organization in 16. I was actually an SD caucus chair last time, so we had all those 4 fights last year. Last time, yeah, that was fun. What else I do? I'm the liaison with the Convention of States, Texas. I'm also on the ROC Texas board. I was their legislative director last time. So I know a thing or two about how to work with the legislature, which is why when our SRC member said, hey, we need somebody to let's pry, and your name came up because you spent all the time up there anyway. So happy to work it out. And the members that were on the SCRC on Let's Pry, we've seen lots with each other over the last time, and so I thank you for your work, and we'll continue looking for you. For my priorities, again, as many others, they've changed since it would have been a couple months ago. State affairs is going to be my number one, about the Alamo, government overreach, all that's going to be big things that need to be taken care of. Constitution's a huge big thing on mine, so that would be my secondary. But I still have the property tax and any tax referendum lobbying. I think those that are going to take care of that, I trust them to take care of it. But Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to serve at your leisure.
You're too kind, you're too kind. Genera, did I get that right this time?
Yes, thank you. Genera Lewis, SB 27. I'm in the South Padre Island area. I am pro-life, pro-family. However, let's see, right now I'm a precinct chair. I served on rules in 2018. I was a delegate or alternate delegate in 2016 in Cleveland. I'm running for national this time. Let's see, I'm also an elected official locally, alderman, which is a councilman. I'm emergency management coordinator, and I sit on these calls daily or 3 times a week, and I can tell you it's heavily political. I'm in a blue county, and it's scary what they do. Also, I'm a business owner. I have a restaurant in a blue county on a resort island, South Padre Island, Texas. My husband loves his employees. He's had this restaurant for 42 years. We make all our money in July so we can pay these people year round. Guess what we're doing in July now? Shutting those beaches down. And they're saying you're gonna get sick on the beach if you're not wearing a mask. That's right. And now our county and 2 counties around it are petitioning the governor to shut down all of our area, shut down the bridge that allows people to drive there. And now there's a group of doctors trying to shut down the entire state. So, how did I become involved in the party? I grew up in Section 8 housing. I was poor. It was my mother and I. We didn't have enough food, no medical care. Poor back then is different than poor now. You don't get anything. And when you go in Section 8 housing, it's a trap. You can't get out. Your rent is based on your income. So you got my mom working really hard to get us out of there, and as soon as she gets a pay raise, who gets it? These people. It sounds good on the surface. Why should they have to support us? How about let us get out? I want to incentivize marriage, not incentivize divorce. Right now, if you're on welfare, you get money if you're divorced. We have people in my county. They're saying get a divorce so you can have money. How about families can have welfare? I'm not saying let's pay people welfare, but don't make people get a divorce so they can have money. You know, it's going to cost a little bit more right now, but when those kids have parents to come home to, in 20 years, this is going to be a different country. My interest right now is state affairs. As an elected official, I lost my race for mayor by 5 votes. I'm an alderman right now, which is actually an excellent position. However, I got a call from one of my voters saying she went in, picked up a ballot, turned it over, and it had my opponent's name marked. Already printed. I happen to have a poll watcher there. She said, turn all the ballots over. Of the ones sitting on the table, 3 of them had my opponent's name, not mine. I called the sheriff, I did everything I can. So what I'm interested in is election reform, election integrity. I reported it to the Secretary of State. Since nobody contested that election, I won by a landslide. Since nobody contested it, there were no criminal charges. You can attempt fraud, you can make mistakes, and there's no consequences. I want to see some consequences. The bar should not be fraud or not fraud, or whether the candidates are happy. So I would like to be on state affairs, sir.
Thank you. What's the name of the restaurant, if you don't mind?
Blackbeard's.
Oh, love that place.
Thank you so much. Please let me know if you go down there.
Sure. La Land. I get that right?
Yes, you did. Lala McClellan D, Senate District 28, Conroe County, San Angelo, Texas. I've been involved in local Republican politics for quite a while. I really started paying more attention in 2009, 2010, and we started spending mountains of money, or at least I started noticing it more. And what I was really looking at was quite surprising to me. So since then, I've been to every state convention. I've served in local Republican affiliates in the Conroe County, we found a new Republican Women's Club recently, of which I've served as treasurer. I've been a precinct chair for years. I don't know if I should admit this to y'all, but I'm also one of the founders of the Tea Party in San Angelo, Texas. That's kind of what got me started. And this experience has really even given me a better understanding of the contrast between the two parties. We are the party, the Republicans are the party of liberty and freedom and choice and the American dream. But yet we have people that have these R labels that don't espouse these values, and that's something I don't really understand. We don't seem to have any say so over that. So, and I know that's probably been a conversation for a while, but when you have two Republican House members announcing to the media that they're going to carry the banner for a very well-loved program, the other party, that's a little concerning. And you have a prestigious Republican women group honoring a pro-choice abortion-minded Republican representative. I don't understand it. So I don't know if that would fit into state affairs. But that I would like, to see what conversation can be had about that. And constitutional rights too. I like so many of y'all at Voice, we're pro-life. Well, I think we've done enough time. We've spent enough time regulating abortion. It's time to abolish abortion. So I thank you, and I think I've answered everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hans.
Hans Sassenfeld, SD29 El Paso. I'm the second child of 9. My father came from Germany. He worked with von Braun in Huntsville, Alabama with missile projects. He did the actual calculations for the first successful manned mission. And so I've always been interested in history because at 19 he was drafted, and I have a letter from him that was written right before they invaded France. And he was an Enigma operator. And so all through that, I was always interested in history. And when we got to go back to Germany and East Germany opened up, and I was talking to him and I was asking him questions, well, how come, the thing with the Jews and all this? And he goes, in this beautiful walkway, and he goes, well, one day everybody's out walking. The next day, sign goes up, no Jews. And he goes, and at that point, who were you going to go talk to? That the government didn't want to listen to protest. The Reichstag had been burned, so the legislature had abdicated its authority. And as I go through the history, I start to see all this stuff starting again that they said could never happen. People would never do this. And I see it happening over and over, where I'm probably the only conservative of my family. I've always had conservative values and fiscal responsibility. And where I got involved in politics was the Tea Party. Somebody announced on the radio, we're gonna have a meeting of the Tea Party over at State Line Restaurant. So I told my friends, well, I'm taking off work, I'm gonna go over to that. I said, I'll probably only be like 3 people there. And I get close to the exit, and El Paso doesn't have any traffic, not like Houston. And I start getting close to the exit, and the cars are lined up. And we get to the Tea Party rally, and there's no parking. And it's on the state line. The police on both sides are saying it's the other jurisdiction's authority. Place was mobbed. So I saw the spark there in El Paso, a heavily Democratic county. But nothing really happened from that. And then you'll probably remember Rush Limbaugh, Operation Chaos. Well, I got involved in that, and I did a little bit too good. I ended up going to the state convention for the Democrats. But there's very good people there, but their values are all upside down. There was pro-life. Yeah, the 10 people in the Democratic Party that were pro-life, I was one of them over there. And I think most of them just stick their head in, blinders. They just don't look at it. You look at the 2 platforms, it's night and day, like you said. And so after that, we got involved, we started doing the elections for our precinct 122. And it was kind of comical. We do the elections, and then we'd like flip a coin between me and my wife. Okay, who's gonna do the Republican, who's gonna do the Democrat, right? And then I get a call from the Democratic elections coordinator, or Republican elections coordinator. What are you doing? You can't run the Republican side. I said, we've been doing it. Nobody ever shows up for the Republicans. And he said, okay, but you're conservative? I'm like, yes. And he said, okay, well, come in and see me afterwards. So I go in, and I was gonna volunteer, right? And it's the only time I've ever volunteered for anything where the first day they hand you the key to the office. And they say, here's all our computer systems, here's our passwords. Would you take care of our Facebook? We need somebody who can do Twitter, set up our Wi-Fi, everything else. And so in one day, I ended up taking over the IT. And I've been involved ever since. I was on legislative priorities last time, ran for state rep because no one else in El Paso was running. No Republicans were standing up. I figured we'd need to have our name at least on the ballot. And so I'm fighting after the convention here. I've got 4 campaigns that I'm on, and we're gonna try to get more candidates. And for Mark, I'll do anything, but also volunteer as tribute for C.
Wait, I couldn't hear that part.
C.
We've got another tribute.
Another tribute.
Okay, who's next in line? So I go back to the third.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
John Berry, SD 30. I don't know how you guys feel. It seems like the country kind of split. Feels like the East Coast and the West Coast drive a lot of what's going on, and us in the middle are left out. I'm here from a rural county, 9,000 people in our county. Rural county, Texas feels the same way with urban counties here in the state. A lot of times, there's priorities that are set by urban counties that leave rural counties out, or place undue burdens on rural counties. Things like taxpayer-funded lobbying. I hear you guys talk about that. I've served as county commissioner, and I've seen where taxpayer-funded lobbying got something accomplished for us where we couldn't have done it on our own. As county commissioner making $40,000 a year, I cannot afford out of my own pocket to go down and spend time lobbying in Austin when I've got county roads to take care of. I've got 99 miles of county roads and not a single one paved. I live 6 miles from the nearest paved road and use a window to pump water from my house. So I hope to bring pragmatism to a process that tends to be ideologically driven. I'm not going to stand up here and pontificate or virtue signal, but I am here to get things done and focus on crafting language for the legislature to get things accomplished and not confuse legislation priorities with platform creation. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to serve here today.
Any preference on the committees?
Oh, yes, sir. C and B, please.
C and B, okay, okay. And let's see, we've got a couple that came in late, but Matt Stringer is up in this order at least.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honored to be here with my fellow members of the committee. My name is Matt Stringer. I'm from SD 31. My hometown is Odessa in Ector County. This is my 5th time serving as a delegate to the Republican Party State Convention. I served as a national delegate in 2012, and I served as a presidential elector of the Electoral College in 2016 for President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence. I've always been interested in pretty much all areas of public policy. I currently volunteer as the Vice Chairman of the Midland Liberty Leadership Council, which is a young professionals and public policy group sponsored by the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I've been heavily involved in the grassroots, focused on Texas legislature politics since about 2011. I've spent numerous hours on my own dime in the Texas legislature with other activists and speaking to my representatives and testifying on the effects of proposed legislation before the Texas legislature, predominantly on constitutional issues, fiscal responsibility, and any other legislation that would affect the individual liberties and freedoms of everyday Texans. Kind of an interesting story about how I ended up on this committee today. I've never served on a committee before at state convention. One of the things I do professionally is I'm a writer for the Texas Scorecard. And during the first shutdown, I interviewed for a story a small business owner out of Lubbock who invested so much time and passion in building a pizza restaurant by Texas Tech. And the interesting thing this past year was more Tech students that frequented his place, a lot more alcohol than pizza, so therefore he was defined as a 51% premise. And whenever the mandates came down from on high, he was ordered to be closed, no exceptions, but his big box mart competitors right next door were allowed to remain open. He called his representatives in the legislature who are not being allowed voices themselves in this process. They continually, we see examples of their phone conferences with the governor being one-sided. It's here's what we're doing. It's not what are you hearing from your constituents, would you please give us input. So it's very one-sided, and it's not how a constitutional representative republic is supposed to function. From having come from 10 years in a small family business, I know the sacrifice and the struggle that goes in to making small business successful. And it killed me to listen to that small business owner on the other end of the phone telling his story, crying because he didn't know when the shutdown was going to end. He didn't know if he was going to have to make the decision of ending his business or taking out debt. And then if he took out debt, we still didn't know when the shutdown was going to end so that he could start servicing that debt. These are decisions that should be made by our elected representatives in the Texas legislature. There needs to be discussion. The people's representatives need to be heard through, the people's voice needs to be heard through their representatives. I drafted a resolution calling for the emergency powers under 418 of the government code to be reined in, and it passed my county convention in Ector County unanimously. And the next thing I knew, I was being slapped on this committee. I'm fascinated and interested in all areas of public policy. There isn't one thing that I'm more interested in the other, but I will say on that particular issue, I feel like I am here today on a mandate from my home county and my home district. So, Mr. Committee Chairman, whichever one of A, B, and C was going to deal with that issue, I would ask that you consider that subcommittee, and whichever one surprised me, I'll be happy.
Okay.
Thank y'all so much, and God bless.
Okay, so now we come back up to the top, and Marty Rhymes.
Good evening, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Marty Rhymes. I'm from SD1. I'm from Gray County, White Oak, Texas, part of Alamo. And I have served in the Republican Party for probably 40 years or more. I've been on a lot of governor's campaigns. I've gone out of state on my time to have been voted volunteer of the year 2 different times by the state. Several awards. Right now I'm retired. I'm probably going to be doing some work on and off, but I was campaign manager for several candidates. I was victory chairman for our area in Gray County, appointed by the state. I've been vice chair for 10 years up until the new chairman took over. I've been a national delegate in 2012, I believe it was. Elector 2016, very great honor. I also run or manage a Republican club so that we can gather Republicans of like mind and learn about the issues, what is going on, be informed, and I don't know, it's like most of these things are priorities. It's real hard to say what's the top priority, which, in my opinion, some of these things should have been taken care of 2 or 3 sessions ago. We wouldn't be dealing with them, and we wouldn't be dealing with the problems that we have because they didn't take care of them. I don't know how we're going to influence them to take us seriously, because that's, to me, that is very important. They don't seem to want to listen to what we have to say. I know I make phone calls and emails and sometimes make visits and so forth, but yeah, you're ignored unless you want to give money. And, yes. But anyway, I just appreciate being here. I guess one of my main things is life. If we don't protect their lives, our children, and protect the children growing up, we're not going to have much of a nation. And I'm very concerned about our schools and this sex change and all this stuff. I don't know, it's just become unreasonable. And I'll just put in, I think there's some lack of godliness in our country. We're thinking about God first, and everything else. I love that. If we put God back in, be concerned about our children and our schools. Our children are in our schools and they're teaching them things that are against our history and against our morals and everything else. And I'm just here and I appreciate it. Thank you.
And the first shall be last. Marty Reed.
I'm from SD2. I'm a pastor from Northeast Texas. I remember
couldn't wait to vote. I'll give my age away a little bit, but when I turned 18, I got to vote for Ronald Reagan. And I've just always felt like, politics has so much to do. Somebody said, you can choose not to be involved in politics. That doesn't mean politics ain't going to be involved in you. And that is so true. And so, as I got older and got in ministry, I heard a frightening statistic, and that statistic has not changed much over the years, but only half of all Christians are registered to vote. Of the half that are registered to vote, only half of them actually vote. Of the half that actually vote, only half of them actually vote biblical values. And so when you weigh that down, that percentage becomes pretty small. And so the church could have a huge effect in the way in which we're ruled if they would get informed, get involved, and vote for godly people with godly principles. And so I've been preaching that every time I get a chance, ever since I heard it. I started out just being involved in the church, trying to get my church folks to vote. And over the years, I've traveled really the state of Texas when I get the opportunity to preach the same message. I'm a firm believer that the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment. I'm a big freedom of religion guy. I mean, if we lose freedom of religion, we're going to lose everything else.
That's right.
And so I don't know where you want to put me, because I'm a Republican because I like the Republican Party platform. And I want the legislators to enact the Republican Party platform. The biggest discussion I had last year with my state rep, every time I talked to him, was you guys aren't doing anything on the Republican Party platform. It looks to me like you're trying to hand it to the Democrats. You want to give them the next session. And I'm not ready to give up. I can't imagine what that would look like. And so we have an opportunity here, and we need to take advantage of this opportunity and get some things accomplished. And my question, I agree with everything my sister said, but my question is, what do we do different than what we've been doing to actually get the legislators to take seriously what our legislative priorities are? Because they were great the last time, but they didn't get acted on. So I'm honored to be on this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Let me put you down here. Did you give me the top two committees? Or?
Well, you put me where you think I'm best.
Okay. I think you'd be good at all of them, actually. Yeah, you can float between them. Okay, let me, pardon me, y'all want to take a short stretch break?
Yeah.
We're not quite done here. Let's take a 10-minute short break here. Be back, it'll be 1:30. 1:30. This time, we're all appreciate it. What? We're waving a little bit on the chair. He's going to come in and talk to us. In between press releases, SCOTUS and the other court cases. I think I've got it. I gotta slide it around here a little bit. That's really the reason for the break, was just to let me clean this up. It actually wasn't too bad.
He's got it.
Yeah, I think so. No, I haven't announced it, but I think I've got it figured out. Yeah. But I do have to tweak it a little bit. That would be a good thing to check.
Yep.
There's also they're supposed to get us things specific. But if you can do what you can, that's I was thinking the same thing a while ago. I'm have some of the hotel room, but it's gonna help.
Say hi again, I'm Jonathan Kelly. I work for Texas now.
Y'all are.
That's what he said. He said to make sure to say hi to you.
We go back. Let me get this finished up, yeah.
Right. And we did that by being self-reliant. And the only way that we can do it. Part of this brother for the sake of spoke with us and told us, okay, I don't have all the answers or whatever, but I do have answers. I said, I need to
Well, the reason they were 50% well, the problem there, you can never take, if it wasn't a 10-minute break, that's impossible. Yeah, if there's any out in the hall, that'd be great. You can't take a 15-minute break or a 10-minute break. A 10-minute break will never go 10 minutes, never. But if you try and 15, it's 30.
Well, at least you understand it. At least you got it.
And I'm told that up here in the front, even when we're on break, to Chair Dickey. I don't, you want to sit in the front, up here, whatever you want. So.
I'm thinking for the video, maybe.
Oh, okay, great.
I don't know if we can consider it, maybe following along. So the first most important thing I wanted to say to each of you, and I hope for several of you I was able to say it in person up close before we started this morning. First thing is thank you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I had the blessing and privilege of serving on the Rules Committee in 2016, and so I know firsthand how important the work is, how critical the work you are doing on legislative priorities is going to be for what we do going forward. I also was the first chair who advanced and got a legislative priority in 2017 in the special session. We got the Convention of States legislative priority passed, and that was huge. Right? That was great. Now, and as you all know, we did not get all of any of our legislative priorities passed this last time, but we made gains on every single one of them. And for years, we've watched the Democrats make gains incrementally, and the cumulative effect of that has been devastating to our country. So whether we make gains incrementally or wholesale, whether we entirely abolish abortion or defund Planned Parenthood entirely from taxpayer dollars, and for the very first time in Texas history since that abomination that is Roe v. Wade, a victory is a victory, and we would need to advance our principles. And you guys get to set what those are. It is so critical that you do that. Mark can tell you, I take the same stand in here that I take on the SREC every time, that I take in every other committee. It is y'all's decision what policy comes out of here. No one who works in the RPT headquarters gets to say what our policy is. You guys say what our policy is. That is as it should be and as it has always been. You now have a chair who's been fighting for that. I testified 95 times in the last session to advance our principles. More importantly, I unleashed the entire SREC to go testify as well, and they testified hundreds of times for your party.
no, your work is important, your work is taken seriously, your work has mattered already, and it will matter very much. And so, as you put in the crazy hours over the next couple of days, know that I'm grateful for every one of you and the work you're doing. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for being willing to fight for our party. God bless you. God bless Texas.
Thank you, Chairman. And what Chair Dickey said about unleashing the SREC, that has been undoubtedly one of the most powerful things that's happened to the party. And coupled with that is we are absolutely, totally transparent in everything that we do. Budgets, meetings, agendas, everything is online for anybody, including the Democrats, to go look at. We're completely transparent. I'm term limited. This is my last week on SREC, and we have never had this kind of transparency before, and I hope it never goes away. So anyway, thank you, Chair. Okay, a few comments before I announce the subcommittees. First of all, I did not plan to say this. 2 years ago, when we were actually debating whether or not to even set up a legislative priorities committee in the first place at the state level, one of the arguments was, can we get enough qualified activists to staff another committee? Okay? I am absolutely blown away by the backgrounds, the positions y'all have held, the passion that y'all have for these issues, and obviously everything you've done for the party in these issues over the past. So I'd like you to give yourselves a big hand. This is absolutely awesome. I mean, I've done a lot around the party, but I'm blown away with what's sitting at this table right now. I mean, seriously. And a real key to unlocking the power of a group like this is just like the chair just said, it's that we get to decide how we're going to do things going forward. It's no longer the days where you have a committee chair that directs everything, like sometimes happens in legislative offices. You know, you combine the passion, the thoughts, the intellect, the experience of 10 or 11 of y'all in a subcommittee, and then when we get back together tomorrow, all 31 of us here today, we're going to have a powerful temporary report and then powerful permanent report when we come out of Thursday evening. Absolutely blown away by what I've heard just in the last hour. I was debating whether or not to even do that, since we had heard pieces of it on the Zoom call. But I thought we had to do that. The meetings I've run, it's a real important part. Not everybody's on the Zoom call. And frankly, you don't get the passion on the Zoom call that you do when somebody's saying it in person. You know, that's sort of the thing. So I'm glad we took time to do that, even if it did take a little longer than I thought. The schedule, we're already, of course, a little bit behind schedule. We're almost immediately going to adjourn to our subcommittees once I get finished and they're announced. In that email, I think I suggested 2 hours of testimony time available for any delegates that wanted to testify before your subcommittee. I think that'll probably be sufficient. You probably won't have to use all of that. But it'll be up to the committee chairs and the committees to decide how long you want to designate. I'd suggest having an identified 2-hour period where delegates can come testify during that 3 or 4 hour time period. I did bring some snacks. My dear wife said, well, what are they going to do? And so I brought a bunch of snacks. If y'all didn't, they're candy bar, energy bar kind of things, but I'll put them out in bowls here when we adjourn for committees. And anybody that wants to grab one is free to. Don't worry about, you know, paying for it or anything like that. Just don't grab 10 of them. I'd remind everybody when we're walking around in the public areas, we're not addressing somebody, to try to make sure and keep the distancing and wear the mask as a backup, because sometimes the distancing, you know, just doesn't quite work out right. We've also got some hand sanitizers in here. There's one down on the end by Marty. There's another one up here in front of Bonnie Lugo. And so if anybody feels like they've been shaking hands too much and wants to come get a little squirt of sanitizer, we got a couple of big bottles of it that you're welcome to use. As I mentioned on the Zoom call, and I'm going to extend these remarks a little more than what we did on Zoom, but we're not writing legislation. Everybody get that? I think everybody here has heard that before at least once or twice on ledge priorities or on platform. We're not writing legislation, but we need to think very, very carefully, including starting in the next few minutes when we go into the subcommittees, how the wording could be, first of all, could it have unintended consequences? Okay, could it have unintended consequences? And I'll give you an example that's near and dear to my heart, because I'm term limited, but I'm running to do one more thing for the party, and that is to be a Trump presidential elector from CD10, if any of you are in CD10, okay? And the reason this one is near and dear to my heart, and it makes a good illustration here, is if you remember 4 years ago, we had some faithless electors in Texas and around the nation. Okay, Texas does not, at this date, have any law that forces an elector to do what they promised to do. We don't have that. There were several bills introduced, one of which, as chief of staff, I actually authored for the person I was working for, and it was specifically on faithless electors, okay? And there were about 6 or 8 bills filed, but most of them were, okay, they got to sign this, their faith, they've got to promise to vote for the candidate, yada, 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 end of story, okay? Real straightforward, sounds good. Until you look into the details. Because what happened, well, first of all, there's the argument, is that what the founders really wanted in the first place? I mean, I'm fully cognizant of that. But the second thing is, what happens if a presidential candidate becomes incapacitated between the election and when the electoral college meets? You follow me? Yeah. Okay? So I crafted, that's an unintended consequence, if you will, that you really got to think about. And so I crafted a bill that basically had the electoral college bind themselves to voting for the presidential candidate that won, but before they did that, they had to certify that that person was still able to fill the job. So it preserved being able to vote their conscience, so to speak, like the founders originally intended. Okay? Why is that important? If you have them completely bound, here's what happens. Texas all of a sudden isn't part of the electoral college vote on the first round in that situation, because we all have to vote for an incapacitated president at that point. You follow me? So think, I probably didn't say that very eloquently, but think real hard about the unintended consequences of how you're wording things. Could this be misinterpreted? That's enough on that one. Clarity. We need clarity, clarity, clarity. There's been people that have suggested, either in legislative priorities or on the platform side, that we should just go with a bunch of relatively soft platitude sort of things, not having a whole lot, yada, yada, yada. What do you think somebody like my friend over here that's been a chief of staff or is a chief of staff and myself can do with squishy language? Okay, you can turn it into almost anything you want. And you can say, oh, well, I was just following the platform. Just following the platform. So make it as clear as you possibly can. You're writing this for the delegates to vote on, and that'll represent about 9,000 votes. So make it as clear as you possibly can in what it says and what it doesn't say. You also want it to be as succinct as possible. You don't want a paragraph-long sort of legislative priority. We want it to be as succinct as possible. If you need some extra detail, put the detail in there. Don't leave the detail out. I distinctly remember getting a call from the Legislative Council, which are the staff attorneys for the legislature, and I had sent them in a blanket, turn these 5 legislative priorities from the RPT, from last time, turn these into bills. They called me back on this. A couple of them were too vague. They said, "What do you mean by this?" over the telephone. Well, I knew what I meant by that, but that is a very slippery slope to have one staffer, maybe not even an activist in the Republican Party, not all staffers are, as you know, to actually be filling in the blank for the lawyers as to what a legislative priority actually meant. Okay? So be very, very careful with that language. We are sticking to the one subject rule. Those that were on the Zoom call know what I'm talking about here. With the 5 legislative priorities we had last time, we actually had 11 legislative priorities, because some of them, as those of you who were on the committee before remember, you couldn't agree on some of the language, and so some of the priorities became compound priorities. We're not going to let that happen this time. Every priority that goes to the delegates for voting will be a single subject priority. We're going to send 15, most likely. We don't have to do 15, but most likely we'll send 15 to the full convention for voting. They will vote on them. The top 50%, and we're going to round up in the case of an odd number, the top 50% will become the legislative priorities for the 87th. So potentially we're looking at 8 actually being bona fide priorities at the end of the day and after everything's said. Now, the way the voting will be done, we have to, again, be careful about how we do all 15 of them. We don't want to necessarily be in the situation, unless you agree as a committee, we do want to do it this way, where we have 2 somewhat similar issue priorities both being voted on by the entire convention. Because what that will do is split the vote, and probably neither one of those 2 will then make the top 8. So if you're passionate about a particular issue, you want to make sure that it's very clear and it's single subject, and there's not another one that's a related subject. You follow me? And that'll be a big part of what you're about to do as subcommittees. The voting nuances, part of what you should tell your Senate district on Thursday morning, which at this point may be virtual, is explain to them how the voting's going to work. They will be able to vote for none, for 1, all the way up to 15 of the priorities we submit to them. They can do anything in between, but it might be good to explain to them that if they vote for all 15, because we're only taking the top half of the votes to become the priorities, if they vote for all 15, they're effectively voting for none. If they just vote for 1, that has the effect of giving that 1 15 votes. And I think most people will probably vote on 3 to 5 or 6 or maybe 8 or something, which is kind of the intent. But if they really want to, if they want to vote for less, if they want to vote for more, explain to them the effects of what that might do as part of your report to your Senate districts. Last, I've got a little category I call follow-through. And we didn't make this entirely clear on the SREC Legislative Priorities Committee last time. That's my fault. We attempted to, but with the communication, so much that was going on, it just didn't end up being clear. My full intent is for every single one of you in this room, and I would invite the delegates watching as well, that every single one of you in this room help that legislative priority committee actively once the 87th starts. Okay? That your job really is not going to end on Thursday. That's really when it starts. because we want you to start being activists like Gail and like Terry. I mean, Terry was my hero there.
Yeah.
Anytime we had a hearing that we couldn't get somebody from Dallas or Houston to drive over, Terry was there, and he testified on our behalf. So, yeah. And Gail couldn't physically testify as much. Is it okay if I share this?
Yes, go ahead.
Because when it came out that she was heading up the taxpayer-funded lobbying group, there were threats made on her husband's job.
No surprise there.
Okay? So I mean, we're in a war here, people. I think the other side knows it. I'm not sure our side has woken up to it yet. It's the way a friend of mine explained it to me a couple of nights ago. So be fully prepared to go forward as soon as those priorities are announced, what the top 8 are. Okay? And if yours doesn't get in the top 8 and you want to promote it and it was 15th, or you want to promote it and it's not even on the 15th list, this applies to you too. Okay? We're not saying you can't work on other things. But once those top 8 are announced, I want you going to your senator and your representatives and asking them personally, are they going to carry a bill? Are they going to file a bill? Are they going to put their name on a bill for each of those 8 legislative priorities? And start that, I mean, as soon as we know what those 8 are. We don't want to wait till the session starts. We can start getting the legislation written through friendly representatives and senator staffs immediately. We don't have to wait. Okay?
Better not to wait.
It's better not to wait, exactly. And Justin understands how all that works. For those of you that don't, basically if you have a friendly representative, you can talk to them, say, hey, Representative such and such, well, use his real name, but, or hers. You know, I'm representing the Legislative Priorities Committee of RPT. Would it be possible if we ran those legislative priorities through your office in order to get a bona fide bill crafted by the Legislative Council? And if they agree to that, then the follow-on question is, or statement might be, I am willing to be a direct contact with the Legislative Council on that bill. So let's say Justin's office is going to be doing part of that. He can set it up to where, let's say Marty is the one's actually asking for the bill to be written. Well, the Legislative Council can call Marty directly if they have questions. So it doesn't even have to go through the legislative staff offices once it's set up that way. Okay, very powerful rule or tool for the grassroots to do. Okay, that makes sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, hope I'm not taking too much time. We're behind schedule, but that's because y'all were late coming back from break. Okay, wow. Maybe I can crack jokes every once in a while. Okay, pardon me as I sit down, but I'm going to announce the committees, and if somebody violently opposes, well, run with me anyway. But and as I go through the list, I'm gonna, as I get to people's names, I'm gonna announce the chairs and the vice chairs as well. And the vice chair is really there just to help the chair in any way needed. If they need to take a break, if you need to just keep them on track a little bit, sometimes things can get long-winded, those sort of things, but I wouldn't know about that. Okay, on the Constitutional Rights Committee, and by the way, these actually split very well, 10, 11, and 10, without too much manipulation of, you know, how much, when y'all had multiple choices sort of thing. On the constitutional rights one, we have Marty Rimes, Walter West, Keith Nielsen, J.R. Haas, who's agreed to chair that, Jonathan Gaspard, Liz Case, Paul Yamarick, who's agreed to vice chair that one. Chip Howell, Michael Deffendahl, and Lyle Ann McClellan-Thee. On the second one, the Justice Taxpayer-Funded Lobbying Property Tax one, that will be Paulette Carson, Madeline Lucier. Yeah, I didn't get that part right, did I? Lucier, okay. Keith Nelson. Oops, I called you out twice. I'm sorry. I may let you pick on that one. Shelby Williams, who's agreed to chair that one. Rich Diot, Jesse Taylor, Julie Pickren, Gail Stanner, who's agreed to vice chair, and Troy Jackson, Walt Smith, and John Berry. And then on the State Affairs Committee, which actually I had to do more adjusting off of the State Affairs Committee than I did the other two. Marty Reed, Gene Pack, Justin Till as vice chair, Sean Sheben, sorry. Paul Yammer, no, that's the other committee, sorry, I already called you. Marion Knowlton, Aaron Pena, Terry Harper, Janera Lewis, who has agreed to chair that one, Hans Sassenfeld, who am I leaving off here? Matthew Stringer. Did that get everybody on a committee?
You did not announce the vice chair for constitutional rights.
For constitutional rights. That was Paul Yamarick. I thought I mentioned that. Yeah, okay.
And you didn't put a
Vice chair, vice
Who
chair.
was vice chair?
That's State Affairs, Gail Stanner. No, that was Justin Till. Justin Till.
You knew it was over here.
Yeah, I knew it was over in that corner there. Y'all look so much alike. Okay, did I miss anybody? And I think did I call out Keith twice? I didn't put Paul on there. Yeah, I didn't put Paul on there because we really haven't decided that.
Okay.
Okay?
Will we be able to decide that when the subcommittees convene?
No, we'll decide that. He would probably want to be on constitutional, would be my guess. Well, yeah, we can ask him. Yeah, let your committee for now. You can't really have him take any votes, but if he wants to sit in on whichever committee he wants to, that'll be okay for temporary committees. When this is kind of a big deal. I'll let the subcommittees do their own standing rules regarding how long delegates can testify. Okay? You don't have to have any standing rules. But if you pass it and say, well, we don't have a lot of people here, let's give them 10 minutes each, then it's a little bit harder to reduce it later on. So you might just play it by ear, seeing how many people. Monday's usually a fairly slow day. It starts picking up Tuesday and Wednesday. Okay? Don't know what 2020 is going to be like, obviously. So it's up to y'all. We will, when we reconvene, start looking at some standing rules for our committee as the whole, but I'm going to postpone those until later, because it's easier to, frankly, it's easier to add to them than it is to change them.
So on a subcommittee basis until then?
Correct. Make sense? Okay, the subcommittees. Committee A, which is the constitutional rights one, will meet in the Clear Lake Room. I'm told if you go up to the third floor, that all three of these committee rooms are on the third floor. The taxpayer-funded lobbying, civil justice, criminal justice, property tax one will meet in the memorial room. And that is the B committee, correct? That doesn't sound right. And then the State Affairs Committee will meet in the Montrose room upstairs. the Montrose. So in order, ABC is Clear Lake, Memorial, Montrose. And I would just add a couple of quick things, and that is that if you are looking through your list of planks, or I keep saying planks, I've spent most of my career on platform. If you're going through your list of priorities, you're trying to combine them down, you can delete some of them, you can write new ones out of whole cloth if you think it's needed. The state committee can do that. As you're doing that, if you come across one that seems out of place that you think probably should go in one of the other committees, just jot that down and send a runner over or something and let that committee know that they should probably take that blank or priority and do that all informally between you. I would say even if you get into a situation, I don't expect this because this committee thing worked out pretty well, but if somebody really wants to swap with somebody else on a different committee, that's fine too. Okay? Yes, sir.
Chairman Paul Hodson said if he has a choice, he would prefer Committee B, taxpayer-funded lobbying and property taxes. So pending the rules of the subcommittee, is it possible to get him in that subcommittee?
Yes. Okay, except for taking the votes.
Right.
That's where it gets real sticky, and I'll come in and talk to y'all about a couple of other nuances. Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
What's the expectation? Is there any output today?
Yes. That was last on my list. Hopefully last, unless you have questions. What I expect y'all to do, and use that online spreadsheet heavily, the tab that's for your particular committee. And those of you that are more tech savvy can maybe drive that part of the committee for the others if need be. But what I expect you to do is basically, if you look over at the various keywords, each committee has anywhere from, 5 to 10, maybe more keyword issues. Try, and some of them are very closely related. I didn't have time late last night to clean them all up. There's several that are pro-life related. There's several that are election related, for example. The first thing you might do is just change all those tags to elections or pro-life as appropriate. So you're not, it's a little easier to do that way, the way the filtering works. Try to boil it down. If you can't get there, then 2 maximum. But try to boil down each of those keyword items, those individual subject issues, try to boil it down to one proposed priority that is sticking to the single subject limitation. Okay? And I know in some cases you may not get there in the next 3 hours, but that's the intent of what we're targeting to do. I'd be very surprised if pro-life gets there already. But, at least based on what y'all went through last time. But that is the target, to try to boil every one of those issues. Now, that's not going to boil it down to 15. That's going to probably still leave us, 30, 35 total things to consider as committee of the whole. But the idea is for your committee to boil every one of those identified issues down. And don't forget, if there's any pet issues that somehow fell through the crack, didn't get on the list, you're at liberty to bring that up in your subcommittee. Oh, very importantly, check to make sure at least the priorities from the districts and counties you represent are on that list. And most of y'all have already done that too, but I'm not sure all of you have. Okay? Is that clear? So this is a boiling down process, and you got to do it quickly. We do want to take delegate testimony. I would almost suggest, depending on how many delegates we have wanting to testify, that you might be able to take that sort of as they come in, but with a 2-hour maximum on how much you're going to take. But again, y'all run your subcommittees as you want. Any other questions? Yeah, Terry.
2. One of them, the internet connection, will that remain the same over there?
I believe so. If it's not, we'll find out. Good question.
Number 2. I have testified before in front of this committee, but I've never been on the committee.
Okay.
Can you be on the committee and testify before the committee?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. no prohibition against that.
Oh, that's that.
Yeah, sure.
I'm known for doing things wrong.
Not very much.
Right.
Okay, any others? Okay, well, Gene,
Yes, sir.
would you like to close this session in a prayer as we head off to the individual committee?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Oh,
sorry to not warn you in advance.
that's not a problem. Because I was taught that men ought to always pray, and not thankful.
Amen.
And I am so thankful for the opportunity to be able to ask God to bless this gathering. Father, we do thank and praise you now for the joy of the Lord. For we know that the joy of the Lord is our strength. Now, Master, we ask, Lord, as we gather around, as the 24 elders bow down at your feet, Lord, we ask that you would give us wisdom right now. You would give us knowledge from on high, that we might be able to lead and guide us and your people into all truth. Thank you, O Lord, thy God, for this time of gathering. We want to thank you for our chairman of this committee, O Lord, thy God, that you would continue to protect him and his family, O Lord. Keep them safe from all hurt, harm, and danger. Let us disperse, O Lord, thy God, in thy presence. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, you're adjourned, subject to the call of the chair to your subcommittees. Tentatively, let's plan on that at, let's say 5:30 p.m. 5:30 p.m.
Back here at 5:30?
Was that in the class?